Have you ever been underestimated or bullied just because of your Filipina heritage or your looks? Imagine being humiliated in public, unfairly accused, only to have everyone shocked by your hidden intelligence. How would you react if faced with such unfair accusations? Join Mia on her inspiring journey as she proves that quiet strength is powerful. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this. Mia Santos stood anxiously at the imposing entrance of Westbrook High School, her heart thumping heavily against her chest. Her fingers tightened around the worn straps of her faded backpack as her eyes darted nervously between the groups of students passing by. Each one seemed effortlessly confident, dressed in designer outfits and chatting animatedly, worlds apart from her simple jeans and neatly ironed blouse. Seattle's cool morning breeze gently brushed against her cheeks, yet Mia hardly noticed it. Her mind was overwhelmed by uncertainty. Only a month ago, she had been living quietly in a small provincial town in the Philippines, where days were predictable, and everyone knew each other by name. But life changed drastically when her parents decided to relocate to the United States, searching for better opportunities for her education. Now, she found herself here, at one of Seattle's most prestigious schools, feeling entirely out of place. Taking a deep breath, Mia whispered quietly to herself, "Keep your head down, stay quiet, and everything will be okay." It was a mantra she'd repeated countless times during the restless nights leading up to this day. Her family had sacrificed so much to get here. She owed it to them to succeed, or at least not to embarrass them. Determined, Mia stepped forward, joining the stream of students moving purposefully toward the main building. Her eyes instinctively avoided contact, gazing instead at the polished marble floors and luxurious hallways. The chatter around her intensified, each burst of laughter or enthusiastic greeting amplifying her feeling of isolation. But Mia remained quiet, invisible, just as she had intended. Reaching her first classroom, she quickly slipped inside, choosing the safest spot she could find, a seat in the farthest corner at the back. As she unpacked her modest notebook and pen, she felt eyes briefly glance her way, accompanied by hushed whispers. Her heart skipped a beat, anxiety surging anew. Yet she stayed silent, her gaze firmly fixed downward, hoping desperately to avoid any further attention. Deep inside, however, Mia knew her quiet plan might not last long. Westbrook High was nothing like her old school, and standing out, even unintentionally, seemed inevitable. As the classroom filled with unfamiliar faces and curious glances, Mia braced herself for whatever lay ahead, determined to face this new beginning with quiet resilience. Courtney Adams sat gracefully on the edge of her desk, surrounded by a tight-knit circle of admirers. Her long blonde hair cascaded perfectly over her designer jacket, and her bright, confident eyes sparkled as she spoke, effortlessly drawing everyone's attention. Known not only for her wealthy background but also for her exceptional math skills, Courtney had always been at the top of Westbrook High's social hierarchy, and she knew exactly how to maintain her position. As Mr. Anderson began introducing the class to new equations, Courtney's gaze drifted lazily around the room, quickly locking onto the unfamiliar face sitting quietly in the back corner. Courtney narrowed her eyes slightly, taking in Mia's worn backpack, simple clothing, and nervous posture. A smirk tugged at her lips as she leaned toward her closest friend, Emma, whispering loudly enough to carry across the room, "Looks like we've got a new charity case this year." Emma giggled immediately, prompting curious stares from their classmates. Courtney smiled wickedly, clearly enjoying the attention. "I bet she doesn't even know how to pronounce Louis Vuitton," Courtney continued, deliberately loud. Laughter rippled through their circle, bouncing off the walls and hitting Mia like a wave. Mia's cheeks flushed crimson, Yet she kept her head down, gripping her notebook tightly and refusing to look up. Throughout the lesson, Courtney continued throwing casual glances Mia's way, her whispers strategically loud enough for Mia to hear every hurtful word. "Probably just another small-town girl who thinks she can handle Westbrook," Courtney mocked, twirling her pen casually between her fingers. "She'll realize soon enough she doesn't belong." Mia felt the sting of every word but stayed silent. She forced herself to remain composed, turning instead to the solace of her notebook. Her fingers moved across the pages, writing out equations swiftly and precisely. Numbers always made sense to her, far more sense than the cruelty of her classmates. As the complex calculations took shape under her pen, Mia's heartbeat steadied, her breathing slowed, and for a brief moment she felt safe in the comforting logic of mathematics. The bell finally rang, signaling the end of class. Mia exhaled in relief, carefully gathering her belongings. Yet as she stood up, a shadow fell across her desk. Her heart sank as she raised her eyes, meeting Courtney's cool, calculating gaze. "So, what's your name?" Courtney asked sweetly, her smile sharp and unnerving. "Mia," she replied quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Well, Mia," Courtney drawled, emphasizing each syllable, "let me give you a friendly tip. It's not just about grades here. Westbrook has standards. Try not to embarrass yourself too much." Mia nodded slowly, her throat tightening painfully. Courtney flashed a final, condescending smile before turning elegantly and leaving the room, her friends following obediently behind. Alone once more, Mia felt her face burn with embarrassment. Yet something new stirred within her, a quiet determination. She realized at that moment she would have to rely on her intellect and inner strength more than ever before, aware that blending in would be far harder than she'd hoped. The cafeteria buzzed with the familiar energy of lunchtime chatter as Mia hesitated at its entrance, clutching a plastic tray holding her simple sandwich and apple. She scanned the busy room nervously, searching for an inconspicuous spot. In the corner, a small empty table seemed safe enough, and she began moving swiftly toward it. Just as relief started to loosen her shoulders, a familiar, mocking voice rang clearly above the din. "Hey, small-town girl, lost again?" Courtney's voice sliced sharply across the cafeteria, instantly quieting surrounding conversations. Heads turned toward Mia, whispers and snickers erupting like a wave. Mia froze, her heart racing as her cheeks flushed red with humiliation. Courtney strode forward confidently, followed closely by Emma and a small entourage. "I mean, it must be confusing," Courtney sneered loudly, drawing attention from every corner of the cafeteria. "This isn't the village market, after all. Can you even afford to be eating here?" Mia's heart hammered painfully in her chest, embarrassment burning hot on her face. She kept her eyes lowered, hoping the silence would deter Courtney, but it only emboldened her tormentor. With an exaggerated gesture, Courtney bumped Mia's tray sharply, causing it to fall from her grasp. Books scattered across the tiled floor with a loud crash, her apple rolling helplessly away. Laughter erupted, cruel and sharp, echoing throughout the room. Mia quickly knelt to gather her belongings, fighting back tears. Her hands trembled slightly, humiliation coloring her cheeks red-hot. She could hear Emma's voice clearly among the laughter. "Maybe next time bring your lunch from home. It suits you better." Without saying a word, Mia stood slowly, avoiding everyone's gaze, clutching her belongings tightly to her chest. Courtney smirked triumphantly, satisfied that Mia had understood her place. But as Mia silently exited the cafeteria, something sparked deep within her, an anger, quiet yet intense, that she had never allowed herself to feel before. She wiped away the tears, determined not to break. That afternoon, Mr. Anderson began math class with his usual enthusiasm. Known for pushing his students academically, he wrote a particularly challenging problem on the whiteboard. "Who can solve this equation?" he asked confidently, scanning the room. Courtney immediately raised her hand, smiling assuredly, and approached the board. Yet, after several moments, confusion marred her face. Frustration mounted as her attempts grew increasingly erratic, her confidence visibly faltering with each incorrect calculation. Eventually, she retreated to her seat, face flushed with embarrassment. An awkward silence descended on the classroom. Mr. Anderson scanned the room, his eyes landing gently on Mia, who sat quietly at the back. "Mia, would you like to give it a try?" he asked softly. Every eye in the room instantly turned toward her. Mia felt her stomach tighten. Her instincts told her to decline, but her pride, still bruised from the cafeteria, urged her forward. Taking a deep breath, she stood slowly, walking toward the board, her footsteps echoing loudly in her ears. At the board, Mia studied the complex equation carefully. Instantly, numbers began dancing clearly in her mind, forming elegant patterns she recognized instinctively. Without hesitation, she began writing, her hand steady and precise. Each stroke of the marker was confident, flawless, the solution unfolding naturally. A stunned silence gripped the class. Courtney stared in disbelief, her eyes narrowing with envy and anger. Mr. Anderson, clearly impressed, nodded approvingly as Mia placed the marker down calmly, stepping back to reveal her work. "Remarkable," Mr. Anderson exclaimed, genuine admiration evident in his voice. "Mia, that's correct. Very impressive." Murmurs of amazement and whispers of admiration rippled throughout the room. Mia quietly returned to her seat, heart racing but head held higher than ever before. For the first time, she had proven her worth openly, undeniable even by Courtney's standards. Yet, Courtney's humiliation quickly transformed into bitter anger. Later that day, sitting with Emma and her friends, Courtney whispered coldly, "She thinks she can embarrass me in front of everyone and get away with it. I'll show her what happens when you mess with me." Days later, Mia sat down nervously for an important math test, crucial for maintaining her scholarship. She solved each problem meticulously, double-checking every answer. But as she handed in her paper, she felt Courtney's cold stare piercing her back. The next afternoon, Mr. Anderson called Mia into his classroom. His expression was grim, disappointment clear in his eyes. He silently placed Mia's test paper on his desk. Written in bold, red ink across the top were devastating words, "Cheated copied from Courtney Adams." "I didn't cheat," Mia whispered desperately, her voice trembling. Mr. Anderson sighed heavily, clearly conflicted. "I'm sorry, Mia. Courtney claims she saw you copying. I wish I could believe otherwise, but we must investigate thoroughly. Your scholarship depends on this." Mia felt the ground sway beneath her feet, shock and disbelief overwhelming her. Courtney's plan had succeeded, and now everything she'd worked so hard for hung precariously in the balance. Mia wandered numbly down the deserted hallway after her painful conversation with Mr. Anderson, the heavy accusation of cheating still echoing painfully in her mind. Her scholarship, her very future, was suddenly in jeopardy, and it felt as if her world had unraveled in a single, devastating moment. Finding a quiet corner near the school's seldom-used library, she finally allowed herself to collapse onto a bench, her shoulders shaking as tears of frustration blurred her vision. She buried her face in her hands, whispering quietly to herself, "What am I going to do?" Each breath felt heavier and her mind raced chaotically, searching desperately for a solution. Suddenly, a gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. "Hey, Mia!" Startled, Mia looked up quickly, hastily wiping tears from her eyes. Standing before her was Lucas Bennett, a quiet, thoughtful senior she recognized vaguely from class. He had always seemed to blend into the background, much like her. His dark, tousled hair fell loosely over earnest brown eyes that watched her with gentle concern. "I didn't mean to intrude," Lucas said softly, shifting nervously on his feet, "but I overheard Courtney and Emma talking earlier." "I know she set you up." Mia's breath caught sharply. "You believe me?" Lucas nodded solemnly, sitting cautiously next to her. "Courtney tried something similar on me last year when I beat her in a science fair. She spread rumors, tried to sabotage my grades, and even got a teacher suspicious of me." He paused, glancing away, the memory clearly still painful. "She hates losing, Mia, but people like her always underestimate those they target." A faint spark of hope ignited within Mia's chest. She met Lucas's gaze, sensing genuine understanding in his eyes. "How did you get through it?" she asked softly. Lucas smiled slightly. "By proving them wrong. Not by fighting back the way they expected, but by being better, smarter, and most importantly, honest. Eventually, people saw Courtney for who she really was." Mia absorbed his words quietly, feeling newfound strength stirring within her. "I just don't know how to clear my name," she admitted softly. Lucas leaned forward, speaking gently but urgently. "There's an important competition coming up, the qualifier for the International Math Olympiad. Courtney will definitely participate. If you can beat her honestly in front of everyone, they'll have no choice but to acknowledge the truth." Mia hesitated, doubt flickering briefly in her eyes. Lucas noticed immediately. "Listen," he said gently but firmly, "I know you're afraid, but that's exactly why Courtney picked you. She expects you to back down, to stay quiet. She doesn't realize that silence can be your greatest weapon." His words resonated deeply, echoing Mia's grandmother's advice back home. Strength wasn't measured by how loudly you spoke, but by how deeply you stood your ground. Mia inhaled deeply, determination settling into her heart. "You're right," she finally whispered, a steady resolve filling her voice. "I can't let her win, not like this." Lucas smiled warmly, offering her a comforting nod. "Good, and remember, you're not alone." Days later, the school auditorium buzzed with nervous energy for the Olympiad selection exam. Courtney sat prominently at the front, exuding confidence despite her earlier setback. Mia quietly took her place at a corner desk, catching Lucas's reassuring glance from across the room. As the exam began, the tension thickened palpably. Question after question tested their skills until finally, only the last, and toughest, problem remained. Around the room, faces tightened in frustration as students struggled. Courtney visibly panicked, her composure fracturing under the pressure of an equation she couldn't solve. Mia closed her eyes briefly, drawing courage from Lucas's words. Taking a deep breath, she opened her eyes again, clarity and determination illuminating her face. The solution crystallized effortlessly in her mind, and her pencil moved swiftly across the page, each step logical, precise, and undeniable. When Mia confidently handed in her answer, murmurs of astonishment filled the auditorium. Teachers gathered around, marveling at her flawless solution. Mr. Anderson stepped forward, a smile of admiration and relief spreading across his face. "Incredible, Mia. You've solved a problem that stumped our best students, including Courtney." Cheers erupted, drowning out Courtney's shocked silence. Mia glanced toward Lucas, who smiled warmly, pride and support shining clearly in his eyes. For the first time, Mia allowed herself a genuine smile, realizing that the unexpected ally who believed in her had helped her rediscover a strength she had long forgotten existed within her quiet heart. Weeks later, Mia stood on an expansive stage in London, heart racing as she gazed into the vast auditorium filled with the world's brightest math students. Flags from dozens of countries hung proudly overhead, vibrant symbols of fierce competition and shared ambition. The International Math Olympiad had arrived, and Mia, representing not just Westbrook High but her entire school community and adopted country, felt both immense pride and overwhelming pressure. She glanced nervously down at her notebook, the familiar equations dancing comfortingly across the pages. Courtney's hurtful accusations still echoed faintly in her mind, reminding her of everything she had overcome to reach this moment. Yet Lucas's words were stronger. Silence can be your greatest weapon. The moderator stepped forward, clearing his throat as silence descended over the room. Competitors, you have 2 hours to solve 3 challenging problems. Your time starts now. Mia's heart quickened as she scanned the paper. The first 2 problems, though challenging, were quickly conquered, her mind smoothly navigating the intricate equations. But as she reached the final question, her confidence momentarily faltered. The notorious unsolved problem stared back at her, daunting and complex. She glanced around to see anxious faces, pencils hovering uncertainly above paper. Taking a calming breath, Mia closed her eyes momentarily, quieting her nerves. Suddenly, clarity emerged. Numbers and patterns unfolded in her mind, a new pathway shimmering into existence. Her pencil danced confidently across the page, each stroke precise and deliberate. As she reached the final step, her pulse quickened with anticipation. With a trembling hand, she placed her pencil down just as time was called. Judges slowly began reviewing each student's work, disappointment evident on many faces as competitors realized their solutions had fallen short. Mia watched nervously as the judges approached her table, her pulse quickening. The head judge carefully examined her solution, his eyebrows lifting in astonishment. Turning to the audience, the judge raised Mia's paper high. "Ladies and gentlemen, history has been made. Mia Santos from Westbrook High School has solved the previously unsolvable equation." The auditorium erupted in applause, deafening and joyous. Mia felt tears blur her vision, relief and pride flooding through her heart as cheers surrounded her. Cameras flashed brightly, capturing the historic moment. Mia's shy, quiet demeanor transformed as she stood tall, finally embracing her remarkable achievement. Returning to Westbrook High, Mia found a changed atmosphere. Students who once ignored her now greeted her warmly, smiling genuinely as she passed through the hallways. Teachers expressed newfound respect openly, and even Mr. Anderson praised her resilience and brilliance, his earlier doubts replaced by admiration. Yet amidst the celebration, Mia noticed Courtney, once radiant with confidence, now withdrawn and quiet, lingering in the shadows. Her usual group of followers had noticeably thinned, leaving her standing awkwardly alone near her locker. Mia watched quietly from a distance, feeling no satisfaction in Courtney's humiliation, only sadness. As their eyes met briefly, Courtney quickly looked away, her expression one of vulnerability and defeat, a stark contrast to her usual confidence. Mia felt a pang of compassion despite all that had happened. She understood how difficult it must be for Courtney to face defeat for the first time. Mia turned away thoughtfully, realizing that true triumph didn't lie merely in victory or recognition, but in rising above adversity with dignity and kindness intact. As she walked forward, embraced warmly by her peers, she carried with her a deeper sense of self-worth, one built not on popularity, but on the quiet, steadfast strength that had carried her through every challenge. Several days after her triumphant return, Mia spotted Courtney sitting alone on a bench outside Westbrook High, her head bowed and shoulders slumped. The girl who once radiated confidence now appeared small and vulnerable. Mia hesitated, then quietly approached, each step firm yet gentle. Courtney glanced up, startled, quickly wiping tears from her eyes. Her voice trembled defensively. "What do you want? Haven't you humiliated me enough?" Mia paused briefly, choosing her words carefully. "I'm not here to humiliate you, Courtney. I just wanted to see if you're okay." Courtney laughed bitterly, shaking her head in disbelief. "Why would you even care, Mia? You won. You proved to everyone you're better than me." "This was never about winning or losing," Mia replied softly. "I understand how painful it must be for you right now. Trust me, I know exactly how loneliness feels." Courtney stared at her, eyes wide with surprise, vulnerability breaking through her guarded expression. "All my life, I've been told I must be the best," she confessed quietly. "I didn't know how to handle failing. I was scared. And I hurt you." "I'm sorry, Mia." Mia gently sat beside Courtney, meeting her gaze sincerely. "Failure doesn't define who we are," Mia said softly. "It's how we respond afterward that matters." Courtney nodded slowly, absorbing Mia's words with genuine humility. "I'm truly sorry, Mia," she whispered, her voice shaking with sincerity. "You deserved better." Mia smiled warmly, feeling a deep sense of peace. At that moment, she understood fully that true worth wasn't measured by popularity, wealth, or status, but by courage, intelligence, and compassion. Her quiet strength had become her greatest victory, proving to herself and everyone else that kindness could indeed change even the hardest of hearts.